Aloha mai, nā hulu, makamai, aloha mai, nā mamo a haloa, aloha mai, nā kanaka, e aloha aina, aloha mai kākou. Eia kekahi mau mo'olelo, po. Before the land was tamed by industry, the oceanside resorts and pineapple plantations, before the cane knife's rust, the dark time of sickness, the coming of cannons, the bitter waters drunk, before the metallic salt of blood. Rains emptied into rivers, the winds carved valleys and mountains, before the earth spurted fire, birthed islands, her churning magma and her inner core of iron, before the stars dwarfed, their coronas ignited, before the centripetal spin of galaxies, the unwinding gestures of time and space, before the light and the heat. There was darkness without breath and pull, pressing the entirety of a universe into a shell the size of an atomic nucleus, waiting. So I don't know about you guys, but I've been really just sort of taking in all of the mo'olelo that have been shared today, and I'm so grateful for all of them. And I have a few mo'olelo that I'd like to share with you. I've always been drawn to mo'olelo, especially Hawaiian mo'olelo, because I always felt like I could go outside and see the oia'i'o of them reflected in the aina. I grew up on the slopes of Haleakala in Kula, Maui, and I have so many memories of watching, feeling the coldness of the morning kind of warm into the day, watching the fog, the noi, it seemed like it would always kind of visit our dirt driveway as it seemed to make its way up the paved road toward Keokea. And at night, I could hear, the pueo calling out and run over to my window and kind of see flashes of white flying by. It was hard not to recognize and have a reverence for the aina with that as your childhood. But I also recognized that the mo'olelo that I was told also helped to reinforce that sense of reverence with the aina and the connection with our kupuna. So I was fairly young when my mom and my grandmother, first began telling me their stories. And their stories were of spirits, of aumakua, of menehune, and kupua. My grandmother was born and raised in Wailuku, Maui. And many of her mo'olelo were personal. That is, they shared experiences that had directly happened to her or to members of her ohana. And by and far, a lot of the themes throughout these mo'olelo were cautionary. That is, within them were embedded these distinct lessons on how I needed to protect myself, how I should pray, how I needed to ask permission, how to ask permission, how to show gratitude, and how to listen to my kino and na'au in order to determine the goodness of a person or a spirit. As a child, some of these mo'olelo were kind of scary, but I'm really grateful for them because they've saved me in more ways than I can count. I also shared mo'olelo with my grandfather, and he was born and raised in Oʻahu and Kauaʻi. And many of his mo'olelo, because he was raised with more of an emphasis on formalized Western schooling and with the teachings of the Mormon Church, a lot of his mo'olelo weren't necessarily mo'olelo that he and his ohana had experienced. But they were, I have many fond memories of our reading a book together. And that book was Eric Knudson's Teller of Tales. I'm sure many people in this audience might be familiar with it. And in that book were many mo'olelo of ghosts who would come back to seek, who would be here to seek revenge or to visit their loved ones, of dreamers who refused to awaken because they're having too much fun in their dreams, of akua who disguised themselves as Kanaka to come back and test us. I remember my grandfather and I being mesmerized by those mo'olelo, and we were mesmerized together. Both of my grandparents were the first in their families to be raised without speaking Moolelo Hawaiʻi. And both felt that loss of language, that disconnection that's created by a loss of language in different ways. And I know many of you have your own stories that are similar to that. But mo'olelo became a way for us to keep a connection strong, or to connect with that ike of our kupuna, and to make sure that we maintain the connection with our aina as well. This next poem I'm gonna share with you is called Papa Hanau Moku, and it is written in her voice. E ho'olohe o ko I nā mamo aha loa. Remember who it is you came from. The first ha I gave you, binding you to me. It is my blood coursing through you, the lush fruit of my body that feeds you. It is my ili stretched beneath you, its redness from which you were formed. And it is my voice you hear in the night when your children call for you, hungry and tired with nowhere to go. Go to them now, hear them and hear me. Flags hoisted may be lowered. Spears thrown, cannons, guns, nuclear bombs fired. Treaties and constitutions, pala, bound and broken. For nations rise and fall with the tides, and your boundaries of pepa might as well be written in dust. For when, in the end, empires will burn in a fire of their own making, and in the end, only I will remain. And through me, so will you. He oia mauno kako. Colonialism must be a part of our mo'olelo today because it affects nearly every aspect of our lives. How we view the aina, how we access the aina, what we grow on the aina, how we conceptualize the aina. It also determines how we grieve for our loved ones who have passed, how we honor our ancestors, how we worship, what we speak, how we speak, when we speak, what we wear, what we know, and how we know what we know. Colonialism forced a process of severe disconnection from our history, our language, and our culture. And it's been very difficult to try to recover from that when you're still in that situation now. It began with missionaries and settlers who exploited and continued the land for profit. Foreign diseases came with them that killed over 90% of our people in a very short time period, just over 100 years. Then came the removal of our ʻōlelo makuahine from the schools and the government arena. Then colonial run education programs and government systems and legal systems that continue to penalize and mandate our culture and identity. We continue to have real estate developers that exploit sacred wahipana for profit. And all of this is amidst a massive foreign military presence that destroys our sacred aina for target practice. We are survivors of over 200 years, over 200 years since the arrival of Cook, who brought imperialism to these shores. We are the survivors of over 200 years of dispossession that continues to plague us and our ancestors in their very graves. This colonial situation has been bolstered by touristic and stereotypical stories and images that try to define who we are. And often, unfortunately, these misrepresentations, racist as they are, end up being taken as truth by people who do not know us. The sad part about that is sometimes it's taken as truth by ourselves. These misrepresentations are often conflicted and ridiculous when you think about it, okay? They tell of our servile and welcoming hospitality, our naive and trusting innocence, our relegation to the past, even our failure to be native enough given the severity of colonial influence. This Halloween, I'm sad to say that we as Hawaiians will join the many other Indigenous peoples and peoples of other peoples of color around the world who will be reduced to costumes, reduced to caricatures. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with what that would look like. These misrepresentations end up teaching others that it's okay to consume us in this way. And they end up teaching us and our kiki that it's mai kaʻi to be consumed. And it's important that we recognize that. This next poem kind of reflects my own thinking on that subject, and it's called On Cooking Captain Cook. And it's meant to be tongue-in-cheek, no pun intended, okay. Okay. If you ask the blonde-haired concierge at the Grand Kihei, he will say we ate him whole, strung his white meat on a stick, stuffed his mouth with apples, and then slow roasted him over fire. If you ask the sunburned vendor in Lahaina, he will say we ate him too, but only certain parts. The head, heart, and hands wrapped in a kind of spinach and then held over hot lava. If you ask the owner of the Hula Hula Bar and Grill, he will say we ate him, but only for lack of fine cuisine, which is why we rubbed his skin with sea salt, boiled him in coconut milk, and then served him on a bed of yams. If you ask my anthropology professor, who has long studied ancient cultures, he might offer explanations from his latest book. The white men seemed gods to those without metal or written words. By eating him, they meant to become him. But if you ask my tutu, as she waters the flowers in her garden, she will invite you in to eat, to eat. Telling our mo'olelo is one way to bite back, so to speak. Colonialism will not be the final mo'olelo of our people, so long as we know that our culture and language are valuable and beautiful parts of who we are, that our ancestors are people who should be emulated and revered, and that our land is worth protecting and worth fighting for. A Kanaka Maoli controlled literature and media is absolutely vital to our decolonization and self-determination. And I know the speakers before me also mentioned this. But also, initiatives like ʻŌiwi TV that Na'alehu will speak about later also reinforce this. They're absolutely vital that we have control over this. And our kupuna from the 19th century knew this as well, which is why there was so much production in the Hawaiian language newspapers that Puakea spoke about earlier. Our mo'olelo must continue to chronicle the anguish of our loss, but also the mana of our inextinguishable hope as a people. And we must continue to retell these stories over and over again amongst our people, over the dinner table with our ohana, to our children, and make sure that our children are able to tell them as well. Ola i na mo'olelo, or ola na mo'olelo, or living mo'olelo, as I'm translating both of those, is a political and cultural framework that I see working in two different ways. And it's a way for us to view our stories as Indigenous peoples. The first, Ola na mo'olelo, or the stories live, looks at our Kuleana to make sure that the stories live, to understand, know, and further a continuum of mo'olelo, and to see our place within that continuum. This means retelling old mo'olelo and creating new mo'olelo. The second, Ola i na mo'olelo, reflects on how we live our mo'olelo, how we end up becoming mo'olelo. Within a colonial context, this has meant internalizing and enacting damaging stories about us that are meant to shame us and keep us subordinate. They conflict with what we know of our ohana, our communities, and what we feel in our na'au. Living mo'olelo is about having control over this process, empowering ourselves. It also means knowing our Hawaiian mo'olelo and incorporating their lessons so that we may become the Kanaka Maoli, the heroes and heroines of our own stories, and that we define what that is. We define what that is. Our mo'olelo are powerful tools to decolonize our mind and to sustain our sovereignty as a people. By giving life to our mo'olelo, we give life to our kupuna, to our language, and to ourselves. I'm going to close with a final poem honoring just such a hero, our hiapo Haloanaka, who teaches us how we can feed ourselves in our ohana with just the stones of the land, who teaches us that we're all a part of a larger ohana of earth, ocean, and sky, and that there are certain kuleana that come with that. Haloanaka. There's no need to sweeten your body's ripe offering to suit my open mouth. I take you in as you are, the taste of warmth and earth, salt winds sieve through valley rains. Just days ago, your heart-shaped leaves faced the sun, funneling light and warmth through your long trembling stalk. You felt the soft earth open itself to your roots, whose blind strands fed the crystalline nebulae that once purpled your corm. Still, you give yourself over and over again a hiapo, so that we may know life, so that we may know ohana and love and our right belonging. Mahalo.